All right, so I think I have it recording now. So y'all are all here for travel training. Again, I'm Brittany Goad and I'm the disbursement manager. I will be conducting the training today. I'm going to start the whole travel process, starting with the request in Concur and moving to expense report. And again, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the chat. They might become like a frequently asked question document or anything like that. So thank you for attending and let's get started. Okay, so a couple things. How do I even get to Concur? We're going to start with real basic. So you will log into your MySFA and it's under the resource tab. And it's right here under Concur. Once you click on that, that's how you'll navigate to the actual software of Concur. I am currently in a test user, so don't get nervous about all these open requests and reports. Another resource that we have is our travel office website. This is located, again, this will go through a whole new thing, but we're still under the controller's office, even though we have migrated over to procurement and business services in November of 2021. But this is our website, the travel website. Here is the PDF documents of the travel request guide, the travel expense guide, Concur frequently asked questions, how to reference guides. There's multiple PDF guides out here. We also have a knowledge base, which is partnership with IT, where if you click on that link, it has some video tutorials. I might put this training out there. The PDF guides, frequently asked questions. If you go back one more to Concur, now there we talk about the P card if you ever need things about that. So lots of good resources out there. They're out there. You kind of have to look for them, but they are out there. Let's get started with the request. All right, so I'm going to start off with a scenario. We see that the request is up at the very top. We'll click that. These would be all your open active requests that you have. If you are traveling for university business, even if there's no money involved, those are called $0 travel. You would still need to put a request in. Okay, we'll click on new request. And you won't even touch this policy right here. You won't even touch this drop down. Request trip name, so whatever you determine you want to call it. So we can do, I'm making this up, there's no such thing. Let's go to, where do we want to go? Well, let's go to New Mexico. We'll just say NM. All right. The request start date. I want to go. I actually have a trip booked for the 28th of July, and then I'm going to come back on the 31st. My request trip purpose. We have a conference we're attending. Our destination city. Oh man, I probably shouldn't have done New Mexico because now I don't even know a city in New Mexico. What's all right,
Hobbs. I think Hobbs is a city.
Okay.
I think
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Albuquerque. There you go. That's
There you
a
go.
big one.
I would totally fail on a geography thing. Oh, and then I'll do awful in a spelling test. I should have done something easier.
Do Santa Fe.
Hobbs is a thing. Hobbs is a thing. All right. So traveler type, I'm going to go as faculty staff, but notice if you were a group travel, you would select group travel. If this is a prospective employee, you would select a guest. If this was a student, you would obviously choose student. If y'all are in athletics, y'all would select team travel. But for this purpose, we're faculty and staff. My trip type, excuse me, will be out of state because I'm obviously leaving Texas. Does this trip include personal travel? It does not, but if it did, you would select yes. Trip justification. So this is gonna you're gonna have to tell us why you're going on that trip, what's going on. You could even put, something as simple as disbursement conference for professional development. All right. So, and then this box is not required. Comments to and from approvers or processors, but if this is going to go through a workflow where it's going to go to your supervisor. So it's your direct supervisor, and then it's going to go to the financial manager. The financial manager is someone who is assigned that particular FOAP. So your FOAP consists of your fund, org, and program. There are multiple FOAPs for every department, and there's multiple people responsible for that FOAP, either for budget reasons or taking tabs of things, of what's being spent. Those are your financial managers. So if you wanted to write anything for them so they would know, you could even put pre-approved or something like that. If you are needing a cash advance is only for group travel and not for individual travel. And that's because we do have a travel card program that is available where you can use your travel card for expenses. But cash advance would be such as, per diem for students, a student group or something like that. So you would just complete how much you would need your cash advance to be. And then you could say meals for students for lunch and dinner on the 28th or something along those lines. Okay, so we have completed the request header. So notice we have different tabs here. We have request header, segments, expenses, approval flow, and audit. You're required to fill out everything from request header to expenses. All right, so we're just kind of going to go in order. So after request header, we're going to go to segments. This is where you would put your air information for your air ticket or your car rental or lodging information. If you do not put it here, you do have the option of putting it into expenses. So for air ticket, let's say I am leaving Houston Hobby to let's see if they have an oh, they do. They even, I guess this is an airport. Sure. We're going to go to this airport, and let's say you've already kind of looked at tickets. They're going to be about $400. Okay, $400 US dollars, and we're going to save that. And notice we have this red exclamation. That's because it wants you to put the appropriate FOAP for this expenditure. So now we will go to allocate on the bottom right-hand side, allocate. And we'll click on this expense that we are adding, allocate selected expenses. And this is where you're going to put the FOAP that you want your airfare to be charged to. And this is your default. This little, it says Concur default. That's the default for everybody. So the way you put in your FOAP is you're going to have to be a little patient. So you're going to put you're starting with your fund first. So you see how these are bolded? That's because I've used them previously. So they're kind of like your favorites. So they're going to be saved up there. But then I want to choose this one. So I'll click that. And then I'll put in my org. I come up with some different ones. Okay. And then I know it can get confusing because you have all this bold stuff up here, and then you have this little number with the description right there. So you'll click there. All right. What happens when you use? Okay, let's see. All right, and there's my program code that I'm using. And then we'll save that. Right, allocations have been saved. Okay, so I'm not even going to do a rental, and I'm not going to put my hotel expenses on this part of the request. So I'm going to move over to expenses because I have some other travel expenses. So we still have this red exclamation point. Basically, it's just kind of takes it a little bit for it to kind of register what you did and then just update that red exclamation point. So expenses, so I have airfare. Let's say I have some baggage fees. Again, on the request side, the purpose of the request is that it is just estimated expenses. So just estimate as best as you can. And then it's also the purpose is to get approval by your supervisor and the financial manager based on your estimated expenses. So baggage fees, I'm going to do 60 and I'm going to save that. And essentially it's just going to copy over the folk that I've already put in there. You have the option to change it, and to change that you would just click on the expense and then you would click allocate. And when you click allocate, it's going to bring up the same pop-up that it did for you to put in your folk. All right, so now I have to add more expenses. Let's do meal per diem. 28, 20. I think that's 4 days. And I'm just going to estimate it's going to be 200. Okay. And then we'll save that. Let's see. I had registration. My registration is going to be about 300. So it's pretty easy, especially if you're using all the same folk. And you can verify that by kind of hovering over this pie graph here, that you see that it's the same folk that I put in previously. Okay. Let's see. Let's do some public transportation. Let's do 50 Uber from airport to hotel. And then let's save that. Okay. And then you see that it brings up this little icon. If you hover over that, it's going to have my comment text there. Okay. So the request side's pretty easy because all I did was go through these 3 tabs. I put in my request header. I added some segments if I'm able to fulfill those, and then my expenses for all my trips here. I mean, for all my travel expenses, excuse me.
Brittany, I apologize if you already said this, but for those individuals who are requesting to attend a Zoom conference, are they still putting in a request and using their T card?
If it is a Zoom, you're not actually traveling, so it's going to be considered. It's not going to be considered travel.
So we could use the T card to register for the conference, but then we only. How does that work?
I would suggest if it's kind of like a Zoom training, such like a webinar or a online training, that you'll use your P card to pay for that training, because there's no travel expenses involved with the either a Zoom or webinar.
Much easier. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes. So so we added our expenses, and then now I'm to the point that I need to attach a document. For the sake of this test, I'm not going to make y'all go through all my attachments. So you'll click on attachments, and then you'll attach your document, and then it'll bring up a pop-up that basically tells you to browse through your computer, or I think also drag it. Let's see, attach documents. So you'll have to browse, and then you'll need to upload either an agenda, a flyer of the conference, or anything that kind of gives support documentation for this trip that you want to go on. So once that's done, then you'll hit submit request. If I hit submit request and SFA requests travel user agreement, make sure you read this, please. It's here for a reason. So to the best of my knowledge, I have added all estimated expenses to my request. I understand I cannot travel, spend travel funds, or book until the request is completely approved. So you'll accept and submit. And, oh, sorry. And now you can see that it's going to my supervisor, which is a test supervisor. If I click on my request and I go to my approval flow tab, that's where I can see who's next in the approval to approve my request. Audit, you'll be able, on the audit trail, you'll be able to see like I created my own request. If a delegate created a request for you, you'll be able to see that that person updated the request. Okay. If you're a delegate, you're essentially preparing this for the person that you're acting as. And then there's a button on the right-hand side at the top that says notify employee. Once you notify employee, it would let that employee know to review their request that you submitted for them, and then they must hit submit request. Okay. All right. So moving along, I created this kind of test request earlier. It was for previous dates. And then on the far right-hand side, I do have an action under my action column that says expense. So now that the trip is over, because that was already July 3rd, I would click on expense, because now I am going to complete my expense report. Your expense report is done after you have returned from your trip. And this would include any expenses that we need to reimburse you, and then as well as travel card charges that have been charged to your travel card. Okay. So
Brittany, when you're including the mileage, or excuse me, the rental car comparison page, what do individuals put in for the mileage rate or the gas rate?
It's kind of just overall like what you would do as an average. That would be the best of what you think it would be.
Like, so whatever gas costs today?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to create a new expense report here. There's not much I need to update because it pre-filled everything out. It also attached my request to this expense report because I went from the request tab and clicked on expense. So it already has it here. On the bottom right-hand side, I hope you can see this on my screen. It says next. We're just going to hit next. Okay. Now, don't just go, the pop-ups are there for a reason. Don't just like skip through them. Please read them because this question comes up a lot. So the travel and expense policy, answer yes if travel per diem will be applied. So yes, I want my meals to be reimbursed, so I need to make sure I hit yes. Okay. All right, so this is the itinerary. So what it needs to know is that you left Nacogdoches and went to Hobbs, New Mexico. And then it also needs to know that you left Hobbs and came back to Nacogdoches. So I'm going to do Nacogdoches, Texas. Okay. I think I left on the 28th. Oh, I'm sorry, this is my other one. I actually am pretending to go to Nashville on this trip. Let's see. So July 1st, I left at 8 a.m. and then I arrived at Nashville the same day. That's my trip. That's my itinerary. And then I probably got there, I don't know, it was a good day. So I got there at 11 a.m. And so I save. And then it automatically is going to flip-flop it for you. So notice my departure city is now Nashville, Tennessee. I left on the 3rd and I left at 4 p.m. And these are approximate dates. So just make sure you get it as close to possible if you can. And came back the same day. And let's say I got back at 10 p.m. Okay. Then I'm going to save this portion. And so you have to have 2 itinerary lines here. If you were to submit, you sometimes will get an error if you only have departure city, NAC, and arrival city, Nashville. You need to have 2 stops because that's kind of how it knows, by stops. Okay, and then that's it here. I didn't go anywhere else, so I'm going to hit next. Okay, there's my itinerary. And then I'm going to hit next. Okay, now this is where you tell me that either breakfast was provided by the hotel, or based on the time that you have arrived or left, what meal should be not included in your expense report. So notice it says breakfast provided. So I left at 8 o'clock. So my breakfast, I'm going to say breakfast is empty there. And then I'm going to say I had breakfast at the hotel. It's continental breakfast. And I'm going to leave all others as is. Okay. Then I'm going to click on create expenses. And this will now take me to my my expense report. So I have the meals per diem. I need to add my other expenses. So one of the questions I get is, why did I put all the request stuff of what I thought I was going to spend, but then now it's making me enter everything else? So just like whenever you go on a vacation, you know things don't go as planned, and you realize, oh, my baggage fees were actually included with my ticket, or I actually had parking fees and I did not know that I needed to have parking fees, or I actually had another expense that I didn't account for. So that's why you're having to add what was actually done on your trip. So we have our meals. We will have, I didn't have parking, but I did have public transportation. I'm making this up in my own little head here. You only have to fill out the required fields. So I'm going to change my FOAP information here. I'm going to use one that I previously used, I guess. There we go. And then payment type. So if this was paid by yourself with personal funds, you would select paid by university. If it was paid by, if you use personal funds, you would use paid by traveler. If there was another method of payment, you would put paid by university. So like if you used the P card for your registration, you would use paid by university. If there was if you use enterprise and it was direct bill, you could put this on the expense report and put paid by university. But for the sake of this test, I paid for the transportation. Let's say it was 60. And then any additional information or comment, these are always helpful either for those approving your expense reports or our office, because we didn't go on the trip and the goal is to be transparent as possible. So you might say parking for, sorry, this is not parking, Uber trip to from airport. Okay. And then you'll save this expense. So notice we're going to have a little red exclamation point, and it wants me to upload a receipt because every transaction requires a receipt unless it's per diem, which is really only your meals. So I clicked on the expense here. And then on the bottom right-hand side, I'm going to click attach receipt. When I attach the receipt, if I had any available receipts in my Concur profile, they would show up here, or I will browse and add the receipt that I have either saved to my computer or uploaded, maybe using the Concur mobile app. Okay. So my meal per diems, I'm going to have to update my FOAP here. If you want to use a different folk than what was on the request, you can. You just have to slowly type it out, or you can use one of your favorites that you have used previously, and then just make sure to save each expense entry if you make any changes to it. Right. So I did use my travel card. So there are some travel expenses that I need to add. So I'll go to import expenses right at the very top, import expenses, and then let's see, I'm going to add, let's hope it makes me add this. So these are all my travel card charges. And I'm going to add a couple over here to my expense report. Let me think of some other ones maybe. All right. So then I'm going to click move, and I can do to current report because I'm already in the report. So here's my airfare, and I know it's a travel card charge because we have this little graphic here, this little icon here that it was a travel card charge. Make sure all my red is updated. And then I'll save my expense entries. Let me see. Yep. And it's going to want me to upload a receipt because every transaction needs a receipt. So let's say I found out, okay, so my airfare is $622. Oh, okay. Well, I found out that I'm going to use a grant or whatever. I'm going to use a different, I want to split the cost between two different folks, or I want it on my discretionary. So what you'll do is click on airfare, your expense, and then we're going to allocate this expense. Maybe. Okay. So I'm just going to do 50% here, and you can allocate either by percentage or amount. But for the sake of this one, I'm going to do 50-50. And I'm actually going to move some of this over to a different vote that I have. Okay. You notice you're just going to have to give it a little bit of time to recognize that you're putting in your correct FOB, as well as it all knows strings and knows FOB strings. So once you put in the fund, then it's going to narrow down which orgs can be selected by using that fund, and then which program code can be selected with using that org. Okay, so we're good there. And then we're going to save that. Okay, and it says allocations have been saved, but there's at least one exception that may require your attention. That's probably because I don't have any receipts uploaded. Okay, so if we hover over this little square here, you would see, or the sphere, however you see it, you would see that I have it split out by the two different folks that I have here. All right. Let's see. Let's add. All right. So lodging and hotel. You do have a per diem that follows the GSA rate. And it knows, Concur knows your per diem based on where you stayed. It used to be that you have to use, you have to have lodging exceeds if it's over the per diem, and you have to put it to a discretionary. There's been a recent change on the last board meeting, and that's been updated. So you could use whatever funding that you need to use to for your lodging exceeds, and you don't even need to split it out anymore. So for instance, this one, I'm just going to charge it all to one of my folks, and I'm going to go to my nightly lodging expenses because we still need to split it out by nights. Let's see, that's what the problem is of using a test one. well, just for the sake of the training, we'll just do check-in date, check-out date, number of nights. Let's do 2 nights, and then my room rate. You'll have to validate what your room rate is based on your receipt. So I don't know, 150. And then we'll make sure to save the itemization. Okay. All right, so it's not going to like this one because it doesn't go with my itinerary that I selected, because this was a test with the July dates. And this is a travel card charge from last year. So we'll just add the different folks here that we need, and then we'll make sure to save each entry as we go on. Just make sure that every expense type has a receipt, and that's on the bottom right-hand side where it says attach receipt. Let's see. All right, so let's say your delegate is preparing your expense report as well. They'll have a button similar to this submit report that says notify employee. They will click notify employee, and then that would give you an email to let you know that it's for you to review all of your expenses and what's being claimed, and then you would submit your report. Okay. One of a good tool that I like to use is if you click on details and we'll do totals, you can see just your report total, what's owed back to the employee, what was used on the travel card, and then the total amount for this expense report. So it does kind of break it down for you on these report totals, just for you to have kind of a easier breakdown there. Okay. If you have anything else that could be added to receipts, such as another like updated agenda or anything like that, that would help us kind of know what was going on with the trip and things like that, that would be helpful for us. If I had a cash advance for this trip, you would make sure that you'll click on available, and then it would show you all the cash advances that you have that were issued to you, and then you would select which cash advance needs to go with your expense report. And it says down here, assign cash advance to report. All right, trying to think of some other things to show you in this. If you need to look at all your receipts, you can check your receipts here. If you happen to have lost a receipt, there is a missing receipt affidavit. That's where you would tell me which ones, again, there's verbiage here that needs to be read, but you could tell me which which expense needs a affidavit attached to it. And that would be you completing that. If you wanted to print or see this in a PDF format, you can click on print email and SFA travel and expense detail report. And then it pops up like essentially like a printout. I would suggest always clicking on show itemizations, especially if you have to break down your trip to multiple folks. It would show all your different itemizations that you created. All right. So let me show you the dashboard. So you'll see that on the bottom, it has all my open requests. It has all my available expenses. So these are all travel expenses that have been put on my travel card that still need to be reconciled. And then all my open travel reports here. We do have a link here directly to our knowledge base library if you need that. If you would like to receive e-receipts, or if you like to submit e-receipts, then you're able to do that by making sure you sign up here. So again, resources are, the resources tab is how you access Concur. Let's go back to our travel website. I know I stumbled through that, but again, we have our travel resources out here. We have all the PDF guides as well as the vehicle cost comparison that would be used if you needed to compare prices between rental and personal vehicle. This motor vehicle rental link does take you to, if you click on that, it gives you information regarding motor vehicle rentals, but there is the enterprise reservation link here as well. If you need more information regarding travel cards, there is, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is a link for travel cards. So travel card charges billed to the university. If you click on that, it does have instructions on how to complete and submit the form, because that has now moved to Concur. So we're not having a paper card application. The request is done in Concur. So there are instructions through this link as how to do that. We have our T-card program guide. That information is out there as well. All right, so that was kind of a quick run through of a simple example of submitting a request in an expense report. I do have time to go through some of the questions, so I'll go through. Let's see, I'm going to scroll all the way to the top because it looks like you'll have a lot of questions. Okay. Yes, Santa Fe would have been one of the options. You're right. So what about using your own car? On the request side, you would always select mileage if you were using your personal car or personal vehicle in lieu of rental. So you could use either two of those expense types when submitting that. Well, it doesn't show you there, but yes. Yes, the agenda for the travel is needed for the request. That's correct. You're correct if you do if you have a grant that doesn't allow per diem, you would make sure that you select no for that pop-up on the expense report side. Okay, so if you have a faculty that has students going with them, that's considered group travel, and your faculty member would be your leader. So you would only have one request and one expense report for that faculty leader. That's a good question. So yes, it would all go on one report. Okay, so this is a good question. So if the department pays for registration for a faculty member with a P card, do we still need to include it in the travel expense and mark it as paid by the university? You definitely have that option. Or you can make a note in the comment section that registration was paid for by the with the P card. So that can be done on the request as well as the expense report. Okay. Okay, some of these are really good questions, but they are very long answers. So okay, so if the hotel exceeds per diem, there was an update on the policy 3.29, which is our travel policy, in the last Board of Regents meeting, where we removed that a discretionary is required for over per diem. That is up to the department if they want to pay over per diem for the employee. And you can use any source funding if your department's willing to. So you don't have to use discretionary for lodging exceeds. You can use whatever appropriate FOP you have to take care of the lodging exceeds. You also do not need to do a separate expense line for lodging exceeds if y'all are willing to pay for it. So the main thing is that each employee has to claim their own expenses. So if there are 2 SFA employees traveling together, that's not considered a group, that's considered 2 SFA employees traveling. And so there needs to be one expense report, one request for one SFA employee and then another request for the other SFA employee. Now they can actually have shared lodging, sure, but then you would have to make sure that they claim their own expenses for that. Okay. I have 3 very good questions that people ask that I'm not going to answer over this training just because it's a very lengthy answer. But I'll make sure I would answer that in a separate email to y'all later today. Are there any questions? I know I went by that really fast. Any maybe simple questions that I can answer? I'll be glad to. So for those that were able to stay the whole time during this training, I will mark you complete in my training to receive that credit. You might be excited about that. You might not care. Either way, I'll still do it. I'll also make sure all the attendees are added to the travel listserv. So if there's anything that we kind of see that's kind of like a repeated thing, we'll make sure that that question gets answered or that reminder is sent out, or any changes that would be sent out through the travel listserv. So that's a good question. So if you have a $0 travel expense, travel request, you don't need to complete an expense report. So if you submitted a $0 trip and there actually weren't any expenses incurred, you will have a button on the top right-hand side that says close request. And so you'll need to make sure that you close that request. And so nobody will get notifications or emails that it's still outstanding. So that's the only thing you need to do for $0 travel. $0 travel, I'm not sure if everybody knows what that is. That's if you're just traveling from here to Livingston and you're going to a seminar there and there's no expenses incurred, but you're a university employee, we still need to know that you're out on university business. You would submit a $0 travel, and then if you didn't incur any expenses, then you would just close your request, and that would make sure that notifications, emails, all that stuff doesn't get sent out anymore. Yeah, so you're correct that travel requests no longer, ever since we moved over to Concur, do not encumber funds. So that's the whole purpose as to why it needs to go through the supervisor and financial manager. So whoever has that role of making sure of what's the projected expense would need to make sure they keep track of that. So that's one of the reasons why requests need to be submitted. But it does not encumber funds. You're correct. All right, well, I hope someone got something out of this training. All right, so thank y'all all for attending. I'm going to end this. I'm going to stop recording and kind of end this training. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll make sure to send you a separate email later today. But